Thanks, Jared. Really privileged to be here. I know when we discussed what I was going to present on and talk about, and I've got a couple of slides. We talked about junior basketball coaches and some sort of tangible things, I guess, to implement in our practices. And just looking at the list of invites, a lot of colleagues and people I look up to and have worked with, and really impressive list. So I really hope this can be interactive. Well, firstly, I'm very and hope it is a discussion. So, as Jared said, please send through some questions, and I've asked him to feel free to interrupt me, and we can go down a rabbit hole that seems most appropriate. My internet has also been a little bit grumpy, so feel free to let me know if it's not going so well. Just going to share my screen here. So in discussing what Jared would like me to present on, we sort of had these two broad areas of international trends and player development. Obviously in the work we're in preparing young Australian players for international basketball and for a life as a professional basketball player in an international game, it's really pertinent. I've treated the international trends pretty broadly and they're pretty observable. The next part of our discussion got into this bit about what can we do at practice to really have our players ready for the next step. And that is one area at times. I think it's pretty easy to be critical of basketball coaches. I think we do great work in Australia and really passionate coaches. And, I have people at the AIS and even hired some professionals that evaluate our practices, and they're pretty critical of me in this way too. But I think a lot of what we do is just done because it always has been done. We're a traditional sport. A lot of our information has come from the US high school system, even though we're influenced by a lot of other things. And what I think has happened is we're often preparing, we've got a practice that is building confidence and preparing to perform, but not necessarily a learning environment. So that's what I'd like to dig in on a little bit. Hopefully that makes some sense. To start with, I thought we'd hit the international trends that I'd sort of cover broadly, what I've seen going on at the boomers level and in juniors, and just what players have to be ready for. And that's sort of a broad thing. And then as we hit sort of what's required to get players ready for that, I think it becomes a little more interesting and hopefully a bit more of a discussion. The first and most obvious one that we'd all see watching the modern game anywhere really is playing fast. Coaches are applauded for high possession games and attacking basketball and lots of sort of phrases, I guess, and explanations of positionless and small ball. But ultimately, it all comes down to just your ability to take advantage of the difficulty the opposition is going to have in changing ends and protecting us, spread out and things like that. So being able to convert, to get downhill, to dribble and pass and attack in transition, definitely a required skill set for the young modern player seeking to achieve a higher level of basketball. How you work on that, pretty difficult actually, I think. And there are plenty of traditional drills and 3-on-2, 2-on-1s, and even system that can help with it. But ultimately, you have to be very, very skilled. You have to do it at pace and under pressure, and with rapid feedback under fatigue. And that's a really big part of the game, we know. And it is a way that Australian teams like to play, and it's a big part of Andre's philosophy with the Boomers. Pace, poise, penetration. Pace was a big part of our arsenal. Dribble penetration and decision making. This is one of the reasons I said it was quite broad. So you could have written this anytime, anywhere. It's like the heart of basketball in a way. It's like the heartbeat of offense is get the ball in the key way and make a good decision. Get a layup or kick it out for a 3-point shot is one of the rudimentary explanations. So what's happening in the game is, of course, a counter to that. as people are playing in transition and seeking layups and free throws and kick out threes more than, I mean, there's still plenty of teams doing with different styles, and everything is sort of a percentage, I guess. But there's more of that than maybe traditional screening offenses and motion offenses, I guess. And it's more 5 out, dribble, drive, attack, finding ways to get penetration. I remember as we were playing Canada in the 2 games in Perth before the World Cup, it was an interesting scenario, of course, because we played them first game at the World Cup. And we were studying every bit of information we could get, including their timeouts. A lot of the time it was they're pressuring us, they're in the lanes, get downhill, get in the keyway, drive them, drive them, drive them. And so it's a big, like I said, it's the heartbeat of offense, but it's also a big area of focus for most people around the world. So of course, the flip side to that is getting in there now, there's lots of things that can happen. People will start teaching, and this is related to my last point here, defensively, start teaching different ways of rotating, of fake rotating, of slicing or splitting the perimeter and making it difficult to make an extra pass and forcing you to repenetrate, run and jump in the half court, Spanish next defense. So there's lots of things that can be going on that can be very unusual. And especially as you get international, you're going to see a few different styles of that, and you're going to see a level of physicality you're not used to. So preparing players for that and breaking it down and having a really strong learning environment for making decisions on penetration, I think is not something you could really overkill. And I've got a sample practice plan in here that's just one of our recent practices. I just tried to grab a random one to see if it would live up to some of the things I'm going to talk about. Misses the mark in some areas. Be happy to, love to have some discussion about, but one of the things it does is it has a lot of dribble penetration, decision making in there. So something we're trying to hit all the time. On-ball screening strategies, broad term, but obviously the pick and roll and on-ball screens dominate the game, and that part's evolving as there is a bit more fluidity in positions and small ball and things like that, and shooting bigs. One of the things that was really evident to me at the World Cup, and in a similar way here at COE became a big part of our arsenal, particularly with Kyle Bowen and Josh Coonan, who were facilitating big guys, and we didn't really have a large number of point guards in that sort of 2-year block. That the screener is a major player in the on-ball situation, that the adjustment of their screens, the sort of bogut, clever pivoting into their screens, the use of gets games, so throwing at the screener and playing off him and throwing it back, and that ability of the screener to work with the ball carrier to solve some problems, not just be a person that tries to not get a moving screen, sets the screen and rolls hard, but is a decision maker, facilitator in the action, and on balls as decoys into pin downs for shot, 3-point shooters and re-screens and all that sort of juicy stuff around the on-ball screen that coaches all enjoy. I think we're put in a difficult place in juniors because we want to teach clean, obvious actions, and certainly if you're preparing to perform, that is a sensible approach. If you're trying to have a strong learning environment and have athletes that you're really preparing to grow and to continue their journey of improvement the best you possibly can, this becomes quite a messy area. A lot of decisions, a lot of possibilities. Can be 3 people involved if it's a Spanish pick and roll, a stack, some people call it, sort of back screening the roller. But those strategies are a big part of the game. When we started the scouting for the World Cup, before we started any scouting of specific teams that we delivered to the players, in the very first practice, you hit some things like shell drill, our basic philosophies and defense, and we hit 2 actions: stacked pick and roll or Spanish pick and roll, which is where you'll back screen the screener. A lot of us would have seen that. And then sort of a flare into a pick and roll. Those 2 actions so prevalent in the game. They're hidden behind other actions or they're used prior to something, that we really had to be automatic and have changes in these sort of 3-man actions. And ultimately, after the first game against the USA, when we had put in flow and our home base offense, and we're still building, one of the big changes between games 1 and 2, the two big changes were our pick and roll defense, not the actual strategy, just the method of intensity and cleaning it up. And then our ability to create our own little sort of 3-man game pick and roll actions. And we treat the pick and roll the same whether the guard has the ball or the big guy had the ball. So Bogut had it on the elbow and Paddy and Delhi were screening each other and cutting off him. To me, that's the same in many ways as Delhi having the ball and Paddy setting an on ball and then getting a flare from Bogut and things like that. So big part of sort of chunking and breaking down the game is that on-ball screening strategy. And then defensive ability, I giggle because we put to defend the ball. Say this to players all the time, speak about it at our practices. The most important thing in the game is your ability to hang on to the ball, that you don't just give it to the opposition. The second most is your ability to stay in front of the ball or defend it, defend your position. And defensive liabilities were just, the World Cup in particular. And then as we're going through juniors, you don't get as punished as much. But I think we want to make sure we're valuing that area. One of the things we try and have in every practice is some form of individual defense and some form of one-on-one. Your ability to deny, so not all coaches would have, you might have a different system, you might play pack line or a lot of zone, but ultimately you just had to be able to take some things away, deny a certain individual, deny something in a set play when you knew it was coming, make entries difficult, to steal some shot clock seconds, keep it out of the post, keep it out of Gasol's hands, things like that. So defending the ball, being able to take something away and being a problem solver. So being able to take this information on defense and recognize it coming in the game, communicating it and solving the problem. That was just, they're the big things. And I think I'd like to really dig in on this sort of idea of our practice environment, whether we have a deep learning environment or we just have an environment that is preparing someone to perform well on the weekend. And performing on the weekend might be teaching our defensive system, which there's some learning in that for sure, but ultimately might not be as much learning as if we are going through some situations, allowing a little bit of trial and error, living with some of the mess, having some expert feedback from coaches, peers, and solving those problems, and having players able to make some mistakes but learn from them and improve. Any questions yet, Jared?
Yes, Coach, there are. There's a question from Coach Darren. With such a focus on playing in the first 8 seconds, what have you noticed with teams inbounding after a made basket? For example, closest man takes it out or designated inbound player.
Yeah, noticed in juniors, certainly, it's more a responsibility of a player. I've had some European teams where it's one of the 3 guards or one of the 2 guards, one will inbound it, one will receive. Obviously, the 4-man is popular in some teams. The Boomers, we evolved to nearest man. COE, we have that, and we actually enforce it, so to speak. Like, you can't let it come out the net and wait for someone else to get it. You have to attack the ball out the net, attack the baseline, and inbound it quickly. And you yourself are mobile, so you will use your feet and create angles and trying to get an advantage on the inbound rather than just get it in. That stuff's happening a lot. I'll admit it's not something I've seen other people coach a lot. I just know how Andre and I did it, and some of those things we sort of spoke about then, and obviously worked with Will Weaver about it. But as an idea, getting it in quickly is very prevalent. Getting it from a rebounding contest, like securing a defensive rebound and busting out, very prevalent. And if you just think about a lot of the things that can make coaches nervous, they're things that threaten us in the worst part of the game. So the turnover is the worst thing that can happen, especially in the backcourt. The ball, or an entry pass or something like that. It's probably so we get fearful, and a young big guy grabbing a rebound and busting out 3 dribbles is for sure a potentially bad thing for your team's outcome on the weekend. But and I'm not, everyone's in a different coaching situation. COE, well, we have the luxury and the privilege of, which maybe it should be more prevalent in a lot of junior basketball, of the development being more important than the outcome in the short term. And so everyone inbounds, everyone looks for bust out dribbles. We do teach that in your initial attack out of the backcourt to get out wide. Sounds like a simple concept, but a lot of people come and try and weave through the traffic. And as good as he was for us sparking transition, Weakness had issues with that at times. He would catch it and try and weave. I like guards with the ball to own the middle cylinder, but when there's a lot of traffic running, coming from behind, you're trying to zigzag through it, and big guys could be running back and turn suddenly. It just felt like the initial kick ahead or just bust out you should just seek sideline for a second, and if you can't get it up that sideline, then hunt across the court. That seemed to be a subtle difference we came across, and hopefully that gives you a few ideas in answering the question. I think it's a really important area. I think it's really helped us here of just preparing the mindset of not having gaps in the game, looking for quick transitions in all things, not resting, not taking a break, and then realizing that we might do it for 40 minutes for 2 successful outcomes. And ultimately that 4 points is a big difference in the game. A lot of the times we have more than that.
Excellent. Thanks, Coach. There is one more question, and you may get into it, so please feel free to reject it and answer it later. But are there any defensive transition trends that you've identified recently?
Good question. I think in previous discussions, a lot of people I see on the list here listening, we've touched on tagging up, and Aaron Fern played a big role in growing that popularity and teaching it within Australia, and did a fantastic job of it. We've tried some of it at the COE. I certainly had encountered that at the under-19 level with Will McDowell-White. I remember playing Greece the first time. The second time, their whole strategy was sort of match up on him on a shot and attack him in the backcourt as soon as he caught him, put him on his heels. So that seems to be one way, potentially with a really damaging player. At the senior level at the World Cup, there seems to be more offensive rebounding focus than the NBA, certainly. And I'm taking really large assumptions here, but you could, and just broad observations, which is all very dangerous. But the 82 games may play a role in that. The athleticism and the skill and talent level may play a role in it. But by and large, it's try and control the ball, stop the kick ahead best you can, but be sprinting back. And players that, at that level anywhere, that catch your eye, taking 2 slow steps and trying to find their man, catch the coach's eye. Let's just repeat that. So matching up seems to be one of the big causes of issues. So sprinting back, flooding the strong side of the floor. I thought Andre did a really nice job focusing and presenting and having us coaches sort of stay on it in all scrimmages. Someone was always responsible for it. Of once the ball was pressed, having side of the floor really flooded. We were probably all familiar with the sort of plug concept and nail and covering the sort of foul line in transition, but he really exaggerated it. People on the weak side needed 2 feet in the key. It's obviously a weakness to that, potential skip passes, but I think it just deterred ball carriers from just taking us on at times. I thought he did a good job of that. I liked it. Seen some people try and drop into zones. Haven't found it super successful, but haven't studied it in detail either.
Thanks, Coach.